Good evening. So happy to be here with you again, and thank you so much for coming out on Friday the 13th. This is a good evening. This is a wonderful time to be together, and one of the great things about having a little bit smaller group than we had last time is that when we do the questions and answers, we can really talk to each other, and it is possible to have a dialogue, a chance to have a real meaty discussion. So my purpose tonight is to share with you some of the patterns, 3 in particular, of people who do manage to press forth and who do so successfully. Not without pain and not without struggle. But as I talk with you, I'll give you some examples, and you can take away with you some, at the very least, self-assessment. Those of you who are teachers or therapists or business people, you can also take away a new way of looking at the constituencies that you have so that you can start to assess other people too, people that report to you at work, for example, or students that you're teaching and so forth. And I think you'll see a little different spin on it. Now, let me first try to scope out what the problem is, and I think we all know it too well. But it helps to hear, again, how difficult it is to live the way we know we ought to be living. You know, Scripture talks about the groanings of the Spirit. The groanings of our spirit are really clues to what we want. And we all have this. Somewhere inside of us, we all have this sense or yearning or press to be and do more. And maybe we feel that when we see an Olympic athlete, or we come to the airport, and I know I do when I come in and I see families meeting each other that have been apart for a while, and the generations are embracing, and you just feel that melting of the heart. And it's a universal understanding of affection, generous affection. So we all have these feelings, and it's difficult in the world we live in to honor those feelings, and yet, as I say, that's really what makes life so exciting. It seems like all we hear is bad news, and I notice when I do this, you hear better. How's this in the back? Okay, better? Okay. If I get too soft-spoken, give me a sign and I'll talk up. Ellen Goodman, writing in the Boston Globe, I found this article about 2 years ago, and I've been using it ever since because she seems to have put her finger on the things that heighten our anxiety as a group. And she says that at dinner parties around the USA, talk turns to young children, to aging parents, or teenagers who don't get enough attention, and to systems that are breaking down. Everywhere I turn, it seems like family and health, the economy and the environment, schools and bridges are all falling down at once. So you have this sense that it's not just one thing. It's not just the economy. There are other things too. For one thing, on the plane, I was reading this article by a psychologist, and he calls it the frantic family syndrome. And he says we're overly busy, out of control, over-communicated, over-committed, overworked, and overtaxed. And he says you get caught up in this insidious cycle. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. One activity, one well-meant, seemingly necessary project leads to another, then another, then another, until you feel your life is no longer your own, that someone else is making up your schedule, which you are bound to follow by some unwritten code. Now, we've all felt that, haven't you? Yeah? All right. I know I have. In the last year, last 2 years, little by little, I've been cutting back irrelevancies in my life, trying to do less and, in effect, do more on a substantive basis. Spend time with people I really want to be with. Produce work that I'm proud of. Live a life that, if I died tomorrow, I could be satisfied and say to myself, well, I gave it my best shot. that kind of thing. And it's very difficult, and it brings up lots and lots of interesting challenges. You have to say no to people that you used to participate with all the time. So I guess I would say that we have no more Leave It to Beaver homes. And yet that's what we still envision when we think about family, at least many of us still do. So that seems, I'm trying to scope out some of the challenges that we all face, whether it be how to juggle all of the activities that we have, or pay the bills, or be faithful to ourselves, or help our children become beautiful human beings that we know that they can be, or be assertive and truthful and at the same time appropriate in the workplace, and on and on and on. Well then, what are the patterns of people that, as I said, manage to press forth? I found 3 tendencies. So just to summarize in the front end so that I can meander a bit, which I have a tendency to do. The first is that these are individuals that tend to be entrepreneurial. Now, by entrepreneurial, I don't mean they go out and they start a business. I mean that they are personally resourceful, that they are what I call creatively adaptive. They don't just adjust, okay? They are people that seem to be inventive, have an inventive turn of mind, and I will talk about that at length. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on that. The second tendency is that they tend to manage their energy effectively. Okay? So you didn't expect that, did you? It's different. They tend to manage their personal energy, whether it's feelings or ambitions or communications. And the third thing, this is wonderful, is that they tend to manage their attention superbly. To be involved in ideas like this, it's very, very exciting. So then number 1, the entrepreneurial turn of mind, which I call the 21st century mind. It's really a perceptual shift, enlightened mind. So it's nothing new. It's simply that we are seeing on a global scale a shift of perception toward whole seeing. And I want to talk about the old mind, or 20th century mind, and 21st century mind. You'll see the difference right away. But the bottom line of it, it's a spiritual or inner logic, and it's graced by the light of real discernment. Okay? And it penetrates into substantive awareness. In other words, we begin to see in the dark, so to speak. It's a way of having insight that logic alone can never provide. And the prototypes that I give to you tonight, just for our talking, for the 20th century mind, which we all still have, it's the Archie Bunker mentality. Okay? And we laugh at Archie Bunker because we are Archie Bunker. We all are like that, in a way. So I have some of the characteristics just to briefly throw out for us to play with in our own minds. It's a polarized, this Archie Bunker or 20th century going out of fashion mind. It's a polarized way of thinking, very judgmental, either or. Either you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. And this is not new. This has been talked about for years and years. One of the frustrating things for me going around as I do talking to different audiences is hearing myself speak about the same things in a different way, but same things that I've been talking about and thinking about for years and years and years. This is not new. It's just we've got to get on with it. And so the either-or mentality is what I'm suggesting to you is going out of style. And as I go through some of these, just these little examples, you might want to assess yourself and see, where do I stack up? I know myself, I can get very much into this either-or. Male or female. Okay, we hear people talk about themselves as if they think like a man. Okay, he thinks like a man, or she thinks like a woman. Okay, this labeling or boxing into extremes, it's going away. People don't like it. We need not do that to ourselves. So 21st century mind tends to be integrative. So the person's mind is both male and female. Okay? It's right brain and left brain. It's linear and intuitive. We use all our intellectual faculties to solve problems. And the prototype of the 21st century mind I'm suggesting to you is like the Zen master. The Zen master, in a strange way, doesn't really have the gender extremes in thinking. And if you think about it, if you think about thinking, your mind has no gender. Mind has no gender. Maybe some little hormonal shifts once in a while. I'll give you that. But it also has no age. Right? It's ageless. All right. So then we have this lopsided thinking in the 20th century mind, and we have the integrative, whole-seeing in the 21st century mind. Or at least this is the kind of cue that I'm going to be talking about as I speak about that perceptual shift. In the Archie Bunker mentality, we have an emotional investment in being right, in making other people wrong. You know, he was always using his energy, talking about energy again, he was always getting sort of aggravated, really aggravated, and upsetting himself unnecessarily, you know, if his favorite chair was not in the place that it was in, or if Edith did anything that he didn't like, or cooked the wrong meal, or if they didn't have whatever it is on Wednesday night, like that. Fragmented. It's a mind that tends to see problems and fixate on problems. And any of you that have fallen asleep at night worrying about something, and who hasn't, or woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock, you know, one of those, where you have something weighing on you and you wake up and you start thinking about it and you know that you've got to solve it if you want some sleep. This is what it means to fixate on the problem. We all do it. 21st century mind is epitomized by the saying, I think it's Lao Tzu, says, the sage rests in solutions. That's the difference. So it's a solution-oriented way of thinking. And if you want to try a little experiment, the next time you have a problem, or maybe you have one right now, again, who doesn't? These are universal issues. If you can begin to think about what it would look like if it were solved, and play with that instead of worrying about how you're going to solve the problem. Okay, how gets you into more of the problem, and the question what does it look like? What would it be like? How would it feel? There, you have a how. But it's the picture of the solution that seems to be the mark of the creatively gifted scientist, artist, and entrepreneur. So here we come full circle back to what I was saying earlier about the kinds of thinking that I've been looking at. Unless you think that this is something we need a PhD for, I have an example of a young friend of mine, a woman who works as a clerk in the little general store, or she did. This is a young mother. She has preschool children and very little education. I don't even know if she has a high school degree. And her husband, who works for the phone company, was transferred. And she needs a part-time job. They have 2 young children. And he was being transferred to the city. Now, believe it or not, people that live in the country are afraid of the city. Just like people who live in the city, here we go, either or, are afraid of living in the country very often. You know, what will I do without Neiman Marcus or whatever? So she wanted to stay home a little bit, and she wanted a little money. And she was thinking about it, and her comment to me, and she's never read any of my books, she could care less. She said, you know, I was playing with the idea, playing is a mark of this inventive quality, playing with the idea, and I realized that for the past few years, I had a hobby that I think I could make money with. And it was cake decorating. And she had been taking a class in cake decorating, and one day the idea of starting a little cake decorating service popped into her mind. And in fact, what she has ended up doing, now see how entrepreneurial this is. She works for another store part-time, but at home now on the side she's decorating cakes. And this is the way that this kind of mind that I'm talking about seems to work. It seems to be inventive and playful and incubate ideas of the solution until at some time when we least expect it, the answer comes. It's like men will often say that they get their best ideas in the morning while they're shaving, thinking about something else. Or I had a friend that used to say that when she was showering, she used to think about what she was going to do at work. And whether she did it or not during that day, it was usually her best thinking time. So she's thinking about something else. So the entrepreneurial tendency then goes something like this. And I'll give you some just little bullet points. And keep in mind that this is such rich material, I would feel bad if I didn't give you some of it, but at the same time I can't give you all of it in 45 minutes or whatever. So the sage rests in solutions. That the person with the 21st century mind tends to be whole-seeing, tends to have that aerial view, tends to be limited only by the limits of their imagination. So let me say that one again. We're only limited by the limits of our imagination. And here's why it's a childlike, not childish, childlike way of thinking. Because it takes a child to pretend that something is what it isn't. A broomstick is a car. You know, they get on, or a horse. You know how kids do that? They play and they gallop around, they have a broomstick. Or a sheet is a cloak. An adult forgets how to play, and yet this is the way we played with our mind, how we learned, how we solved problems when we were little. So the most creative individuals that I am seeing today are individuals who have honored some quirky way within themselves to grasp all of this stuff that's going on in their own unconscious mind. And I'll give you three examples, a couple of examples, just so that you see that the theory is based on observation. I'm not trying to tell you something that doesn't exist. I have a friend who's a former client of mine. I have a small practice, very small now. I work with senior management in the area of loosely in leadership communications, something like that. And a friend of mine who's a CFO, he's just recently retired, of a company, is what I call a hall wanderer. Okay, and that's the way he captures these elusive ideas. That's his mode. When he was new in the company that he's in, I was also new at that time, and I remember that he went into this sort of stodgy company. They brought him in because he has a reputation for being creative, and he'd go into this wonderful corner office, big view, and a very prim secretary, and she'd give him the schedule for the day, and he'd say, "Oh, that's fine," and then he'd just wander off. And she'd have to bring him back and put him in the right meeting room, and he'd sit there for a while, and up would get the suits, you know, and they'd show all their things, looked like a commercial, talking real fast, their pointers, and people are falling asleep, very boring, and he'd just get up and wander out. And they'd have to go on with their meeting. You know, it was one of those things. Well, actually he got into trouble at this company because it wasn't in the mode of, you know, it wasn't business as usual. Until about 2 years, things started to pick up. The division presidents began to be more casual, first name basis. They started to brainstorm more and so on and so forth. And I mention that only because sometimes in a corporation it's hard to find ways to think creatively. We're very busy. It's not that. But we're busy according to the expectations and the sort of the mechanism that's already been imposed on us. And this fellow had his own way. My own experience is that it helps me to live in a rural neighborhood. I really like the silence. In fact, I'm a contemplative. I have what you would call a mixed life. Part of the time I'm in this small town and I impose a pretty austere schedule on myself. I think I'm an ascetic. I call myself an ascetic with a lot of charge cards. So I'm not sure what that means, but I break out of that asceticism. But I like that very much. It helps me to create, and as I said, create substantively. But at the same time, I would not feel as if everything were opening up for me, all the ideas and so forth, if I didn't get on a plane once in a while, or go into the city, or listen to music, and travel, and the movement of traveling I find very, very good. So this isn't to say copy Marcia or the hall wanderer. It's to say, what's your quirk? What's the way that you prefer to honor the elusive ideas of your own best thinking?